back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to do my May wrap up and tell you a little bit about everything I managed to get read in the month of May. I'm probably going to just whiz through this in order again from lowest to highest. I'm not going to give too much detail on them unless I won't be reviewing them, in which case I'll tell you about them here. However, most of these books you'll see full reviews for very soon, so look out for those coming because I'm a little bit behind. And do let me know in the comments if there's any you particularly want me to review first and I will prioritise those. So let's get started with the books I read in May. So during the month of May was actually Getting Graphic, which is a graphic novel readathon or graphic artwork book readathon that Eleanor and I host together, and we had a great time just hosting that, and over one of the May bank holidays I think, so it worked really well. I was definitely able to read a decent chunk of stuff that day and I had a really good time sort of responding to everyone, and I actually managed to go for almost the whole 24 hours. I started quite early, I had a little snooze, and then I finished up about 9-10 at night, something like that. So I read a lot for that. If you are interested in hearing what I read for Getting Graphic, I actually did a vlog of my day when I was doing Getting Graphic, so if you are interested in kind of finding out a bit more about what I read and what I thought of it, then you could go and check that out. So I won't talk about any of the graphic things here. Besides that, the books that I read are as follows. I would have to say that my biggest disappointment of the month is probably the one I'm about to talk about, which is The Song of Achilles by Madeleine Miller. I personally thought I was going to love this. It does have a gay romance at the centre, and it focuses on a sort of historical fiction version of what happened with Achilles and his life and his adventures. We follow two main characters. One of them is a young man who is in training. One of them is a young sort of lordling and the other one is Achilles himself, and they end up becoming friends and eventually lovers. However, for me, it just didn't really click. Something about the writing style, something about the way that the story was told, it just didn't work for me, and I found myself really getting annoyed with the characters rather than investing in their story and enjoying them. So maybe they were just a bit too naive and predictable for me, and they just did really dumb things quite a lot. But I just didn't like this one, guys. I'm so sorry because so many of you did and I thought I was going to love it, but no. This one was just not for me, and I don't know if I'll be reading any more of her work because it's kind of just put me off, I'm going to be honest. I don't really think I want to go through more of that writing style. So I gave it 2 stars. Next up, as part of the readathon to rule them all, I read quite a few different sort of diverse books, and one of those was The Killing Moon by N.K. Jemisin. This one was part of a duology, and I was really hoping to like it, although N.K. Jemisin is a bit Marmite for me. Some of her series I've loved, like the Broken Earth ones, and some of them I just haven't, like the Inheritance Cycle, and this kind of falls in the middle of those two. I didn't love it by any means, and I didn't hate it as much as I hated the other series. But it really wasn't great. It was just okay. I read this as a buddy read and we had a good time talking about it, but it just really wasn't my cup of tea. It was just a bit boring and predictable, and it felt a little bit YA to me in terms of the pacing was very fast and the story was kind of very quick, which was good, but you didn't get the development, you didn't get the kind of insight into the characters' minds and motivations, and I was missing that a little bit whilst reading it, so I gave that 2 stars. Fudoki. Wasn't a big fan of Fudoki, I must admit. I gave it a 2 stars in the end. It just didn't grip me as much as I wanted, and I really thought it was going to be a lot more fun than it was and a lot more cultural. It definitely had some cultural elements and it definitely played off those, but the story just didn't really work for me. I didn't feel the emotional connection I wanted, and again, I just felt a little bit like detached and removed from things. It didn't feel as exciting and genuine and fun as I wanted it to. It just felt a little bit like you were being told a story and you weren't getting invested. Another series that I actually do have the books for because I've got to review them and I wanted to show you off because I'm going to be doing a giveaway of these, is this series. This is the Tales of Captain Duke series, which is by Rebecca DM. This series is one that I was sent for review, and it's a series of tiny little novellas. I've read all of them this month and I gave all of them 3 stars. I really enjoyed the series. It's very fun, but it does feel quite small and light because of course they are just novella size, they're very small. However, it's a sort of steampunk piratey series that focuses on a female main character who joins an airship and kind of becomes part of the crew, and it's all about her adventure settling into the crew and also how the crew react to her. Kraken Wakes, which is by John Wyndham. I read this one and definitely enjoyed it, although it was the least favourite of the John Wyndhams I've read so far. I gave it a 3 stars and I think it's an interesting concept, but it didn't quite have the emotional, personal feeling I think some of the others did. So that was just a 3-star read for me. Invisible Planets. This is an anthology which is collected science fiction from China, all translated by Ken Liu, and it's written by various different authors. I really enjoyed this collection as a whole. I don't think there was any that I didn't like. In fact, I enjoyed all of them. However, some of them I enjoyed more than others, so I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I definitely think it was well worth reading. So if you are interested in sort of translated fiction, especially science fiction, then this is a great collection to kind of dip your toe in and find out some names, and then obviously you can go further and find out more about these authors if you like their stuff. So I think it's great for that. I then read Legendary, which is by Stephanie Garber, and this one is the sequel to Caraval. I loved Caraval when I read it last year, so I was hoping to really enjoy Legendary, and I did enjoy it for sure, but it wasn't quite as good as I hoped it would be. It was a 4-star read still. I really liked it, and I think there were elements that were super fun, but for me it felt a little bit similar to the first one. It didn't feel unique enough in its own way. It felt like some of the things that we'd kind of seen in book 1 were rehashed a little bit, but the adventure was still good fun, and I think the main character switching to the other sister from the one that we follow in book 1 was a good move on the author's part to just about scrape the 4 stars, but only mainly because of the ending. There were some predictable bits. Also, as part of the readathon, I read Neverwhere, which I gave 4 stars to. I really enjoyed this one. I actually read the illustrated one and listened to the audiobook, so I was doing them simultaneously and kind of dipping in and out of both, and I recommend both. I think they're both fantastic. Neverwhere itself was super fun. It's not a kid's story, it's actually an adult story, even though it's illustrated, and it focuses on a world where there is a new London underneath the current London, and it's London below, where everything is a bit backwards and batty and bizarre and peculiar, and it's really fun, and I definitely recommend it. So if you're interested in a kind of twisted story about London, then this is definitely that, and I'd say it's well worth a read. I gave that 4 stars. Next up, I have a book that was a kind of sequel to a previous one by Caroline Jessup. This is Triumph, and I read her previous one, Escape. Escape was the story of her escaping from the fundamentalist Church of the Latter-day Saints, and Triumph is the continuation of her story, written a few years later once they've escaped, and also a lot of stuff has happened in the media and in the news on a national scale in America to do with the FLDS and kind of outing a lot of the practices that go on there and how bad they can be. The polygamous sect was kind of invaded by the police and lots of things went on, and she is writing about her point of view on the outside of it, but having lived through a lot of what these people are going through. She kind of talks about how her own personal time there and her own life experiences kind of make her relate more than some other people would. So I really enjoyed it. Again, it was a fantastic read. She tells her story very well, and I really enjoyed the way that she wrote in Escape and also the way that it kind of comes across in Triumph. It's a much smaller book, but it still reads really easily, and I definitely recommend it. It's a non-fiction, so it is all about real life and real events, and I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read a couple of Lynn Flewelling books. I've absolutely been loving her work, and I actually read 4 of her books in May. I read Shadow's Return, The White Road, Casket of Souls, and Shards of Time. All of them were really, really good, and all of them are part of the same series, which is the Night Runner series. I gave all of the ones that I read in the series 4 stars, but I gave Shadow's Return 4.5 because that was my favourite in the series. I think the series as a whole is a 4-star series. I really enjoyed it. I think the characterisation of Alec and Seragil in particular, the 2 main characters, is absolutely fantastic. Such a good story. The world is all based around sort of Oren Fae and Tia Fae, who are different fae-like creatures, kind of like elves, but they're magical. And then we also have wizards, and we have different people in different types of relationships. So we have a gay relationship at the centre of the whole series, and then we also have different relationships in the background in terms of friendships, loving relationships, families. There's so many different angles that the author works with here, and she does a fantastic job of really making these characters seem authentic and real, and I loved them so much. So I'll definitely review these together in a batch, but honestly this series as a whole was so good. I read the first 2, 3 a while ago, but yeah, this series
this month in particular just was my focus and I loved it. One of my favourite books of the month was The Tiger's Daughter, which is so fantastic. It's an LGBTQ+ relationship and it focuses on a fantasy world, two warrior women, very different in terms of how they're brought up and also very different in terms of personality. But of course they become firm friends when they're children and then later on develop a loving relationship, and it's all about how the two of them take on the world and try and kind of overcome the evil people in their past and in their present, and also try and find out about this darkness that is kind of creeping across the land. I've done a full review of this. I thoroughly recommend it. It is honestly fantastic. I am so excited for the next one. It's just great. So I can't wait for that, and I gave that 5 stars. So ending on a high, that is everything that I read in the month of May. I really enjoyed a lot of what I read, but also had quite a few 2 stars, as you've heard. I'd love to hear what you guys have been reading in the month of May and also in the start of June, because I'm aware this is quite a late wrap up, so do let me know what you're currently reading too. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.